Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This amendment would strike Section 1 of the bill, which relates to stacking sentences. I do want to talk about this, and I think it highlights some of the problems that Representative Nyabe-Corrado and Representative Guillen talked about in the opening of this. Not changing the underlying offenses, which may be problematic in and of themselves, but we start taking away discretion in putting in mandatory sentences, and then also in Section 1, giving the ability to stack. So stacking provisions are not normally used in criminal law. There's very narrow cases that we ask and give permission to stack. Those are intoxication cases with multiple dead bodies and certain crimes against children. The basic idea is if you do one thing and there is one criminal episode, then you get one sentence. What stacking does is allow multiple sentences for a single act that we are carving up into multiple offenses. It's really a bad way of making laws because it actually thwarts our legislative intent. We decide as a legislature what punishment is suitable for a crime. Stacking can turn what many of us may see as a low-level offense into the kinds of punishment ranges that we see for murders and rapes. But more importantly, the concept of mandatory minimums, and especially exacerbated by stacking, is something that we have been retreating from in criminal justice for years because it's wrought untold misery in our system with no real benefit. In fact, you saw changes even under the Trump administration in 2018 to these very types of policies. People are retreating from this on the left and the right side of the aisle because there is no benefit to doing this. The concept of stacking can lead to the idea of huge exposures for individuals in our court system. Innocent people that will plead guilty instead of risking trials. Criminal defense lawyers will sit with their clients and they will say, look, I think you got a good case here, but if they get you on the back end of this, you are looking at 50 years. So you are going to incentivize innocent people pleading to sentences that they shouldn't be pleading to because of the huge exposure that stacking creates. That is not a just system. This also leads to massively disproportionate sentences. Here we're talking about things like trespassing or leading officers on a foot chase. We're also jacking those up to third-degree felonies with 10-year minimums. With stacking, on top of that, we're going to put all those together. So 20, 30, 40, 50-year minimums for crimes that in other circumstances may actually be misdemeanors, thwarting our legislative intent when we set the penalty range for these offenses. And ultimately, if your goal is to nail the big-time traffickers and smugglers with these provisions, you are not going to get them. This law will not touch them. What this law will get is the 20-year-old kid who took $200 from the kind of person you don't say no to anyway to drive someone from one side of town to the other. That's who you're going to ensnare with ill-thought provisions like this. We should reject this. This provision in and of itself takes away our legislative ability to set punishment ranges, and it gives no discretion in offenses that we have determined are low-level offenses, and is a vast departure from what we do in criminal law across the board. We should be very wary of changing the philosophy on stacking for this purpose when over decades and decades and decades, only very narrow exceptions, like I said before, where there are multiple dead bodies or where there are victims that are children, where we've allowed stacking. This bill with this provision will not hit the big time folks that you think you're going to hit. It is going to hit hard those folks that are grabbed up in this process innocently and without real education about what's going on. That's what this provision would do in reality on the front lines. Taking this out, leaving everything else in place. If we want to have mandatory minimums, if that's the track we want to go down, I don't agree with it, but if that's where we're going to go down, that's one thing. Taking it and adding stacking to it exacerbates what is already a bad policy and is a vast departure from what this body has done over decades of criminal jurisprudence.